Hi, I'm Chuck Dorsett for Weaver Leathercraft, and we're going to have a great time making a simple yet very professional leathercraft project. If you're new to leather or you want to give leather a try, this video is made just for you. We're going to keep it simple. In fact, we're going to do this in a progression. You'll see exactly what I'm talking about. Second big point, we're going to make a small pouch. Beautiful, clean, and tight. But here's the trick. With the same techniques, all we have to do is change our dimensions and we can make 40, 50, 60 different projects from a card case all the way up to a laptop case. All right, anything I use in this video, weaverleathercraft.com or check below. We've got links going to take you straight to our website. So let's step over here and start with a very simple pattern. And we're going to make this one as simple as we possibly can. It's not fancy? Well, not yet. Let's work up to that. So with this, we can make this any width, any length, but let's go with 5 by 4. That makes a good sized pouch. So really, all told, if you notice, that's just one long piece of leather. So I just need 3 panels, 5 by 4. 1, 2, 3. So let's come over here. This is just a piece of copy paper. Now, if you need a piece that's a little bit bigger, just tape some together. But let's do this. Let's make a mark, 5 inches. Let's come down here and do the same. Now, my square, this is going to be one of the most useful tools in your shop, but this is not going to reach. So what I want to do is just grab some type of straight edge, anything that's got a good long straight edge on it. Let's lay this in and run our pen across those 2 marks. Now, we're using a pen, not my favorite. In fact, I swear, we've been at this less than a minute and I'm covered in ink. But it's the only thing that the camera's going to pick up well. Okay, so 4 inches. Let's do 3 4-inch panels. Now with this, what I want to do is square as best I can along my line. The more square I can make this, the better the pouch is going to fit together at the edges. There we go. Okay, well that's not a difficult pattern. Let's cut this out. And to do that, I'm just going to use a simple box cutter. In fact, you'll see, I'm going to use this to cut everything we work on. And our last cut, well, really, there's only 2 cuts, so not terribly complicated there. Let's move this out of our way. To keep from being confused, let's do this. Let's take our straight edge and our pen. What I'm going to do is I'm going to run over both of these lines again. Basically, I'm scribing these lines so we can get a good fold. Basically, we're just going to make a prototype out of our pattern. That's a good first way to see if everything's going to line up for us. Let's fold on our lines. Well, easy enough. So basically, there's our pattern. Now, to keep from being confused, let's do this. Looking at our pouch, we're going to name this our flap. So let's write in flap. Let's write in pouch. And you could go with pouch pocket or pouch face. And then over here, let's just drop in back. That's going to keep us from getting confused. So we're going to fold this over and that's going to fold down. Now, we're going to drop in rivets. So let's do this. Let's come in 1/4 of an inch from either side on our pouch and draw in a line. Now you notice down here at the bottom, we're going to have a bow here where that leather bends around. So let's come in 3/4 of an inch and make a mark on our line. That'll be our first rivet on the bottom. Right, let me clean that off before I make a bigger mess. Let's add 4 more marks, 3/4 of an inch apart. 3/4, 3/4, and look at that. Nice. Let's do the same on the other side. Well, that's not a difficult pattern. Easy enough, in fact. Let's step over to our main table. Let's cut some leather. The only tools we're going to need here, there's our trusty square again. We can always cut on plywood. It's inexpensive, easy to find, and I cut on this for years. Last thing, simple box cutter. I cut every project I make with this. Let's start with a new blade though. New project, new blade. Now with our pattern, bunch of straight lines here. So we've got one of our leather panels, 12 by 24. Let's lay this in. Now we can trace this. Copy paper, not a great pattern material. We're going to slip under. So let's just do this. Let's make a mark, mark our corner, mark our edge. Well, that's really all we need. So let's take our square and let's cut. Now when I'm cutting my leather, there we go. When I'm cutting my leather, I want to hold my square good and tight. But also I want to keep my blade at a low angle. That's going to keep that blade from jumping that straight edge. So watch this, new blade. There we go. Look how easy that was. Notice how easy our leather cut. Well, first off, new blade every time. So our panel is ready to go. Let's move that out of the way. All I need to do here is mark for my bends. So I'm going to make a mark on both sides. There we go. Camera's not going to pick that up, but it's easy enough for me to see. And there we go. Okay, so what we've done is we've marked our bends. So we're going to add bends. Here's our pouch. We're going to bend this at the bottom. So we're simply going to add glue either to our pouch flap, or the backing. So this is just a common white glue. It's great glue. Love this. But what we're going to do, let's just mark. Now, really on this pattern, flap, pouch pocket doesn't really matter. But let's start down here. Now I'm just going to bring some glue up to our bottom bend line. Okay, same thing on the other side. Now we don't need a lot of glue. Leather is great for glue because it's very porous. Okay, let's take this and we're going to bend this up right to our upper mark. Right here I've just got some clips. In fact, I've got an array here because it doesn't matter what kind of a clip we use. We just don't want a clip that's so hard it's going to ding the leather. But let's just drop in a couple of clips, both sides, hold this down and let it dry. So we're clipped. Let's give that about maybe 5 minutes to let that glue set. Plenty of dry time. In fact, that looks good, and this white glue, it's an excellent glue. I love it. Now let's do this. We certainly could have marked earlier, but let's keep it simple. So there's the front of our pocket. So let's lay this right down. And let's just mark for where we're going to punch our holes. Good, there we go. Easy enough to see. Let's step over to our punch table, punch our holes, set our rivets. This little pouch is done. Now we're going to step up to punching and setting a rivet. So two tools here. First off, our marble. This is the center of our leather shop. If we don't have a piece of marble, it's no issue. We can buy a rivet setter. It's got a little anvil with it. We can use that. The second thing, revolving punch. This will be the most used tool in your shop. Notice we've got 6 sizes of tubes or hole sizes. Now I can click that around. We're going to go to the smallest and we'll see why here very shortly. So we've got our pattern marked. Let's drop in a rivet hole or a punch hole on top of each mark. There we go. Easy enough. So I'll do the other 8. And our last hole. But notice too, look at our edges. Thus far, very clean and even. Good. Now we're going to jump up to a double cap rivet. It's my favorite. It's got a cap on the back. So it's a very professional rivet. 3 sizes for heavier weight leathers and or multiple plies. But right here, we're going to use the smallest, 1/4 inch. Now I'm going to take this. I'm going to come from the back of my project. I'm going to push that through. We used a smaller hole. So now that rivet is a little snug in that hole. First off, it's going to be a better bite. But secondly, I can put all my posts in and they're not going to fall out and roll around. So let's load the posts into the balance of the holes. Okay, last one. Let's lay this over and press this down. We've got about 1/16 of an inch, maybe a hair more, of rivet post above our leather. That's what we want. We don't want too much. If we set a rivet that's too long, it's going to offset on us. Very frustrating. Let's take our cap. Cool thing about double caps, there's a little crimp in the post. So therefore I can snap my cap down on. Again, I can load all my rivets without setting them. They're not falling out across my table. That too, very frustrating. So let's load caps on the balance. And the last cap. So again, what we can do if we don't have our quartz, we can lay this on our little anvil, flat side up, and set our rivet from there. But since I've got the quartz, I'm going to use it. Now, we sell a little pack. It's got your anvil, setter, and a variety of rivets, so relatively inexpensive. On our setter, this will last forever. You will always use this tool. But notice it's got a concaved end. I'm going to use that to set my rivet so I don't flatten the cap. All we need, 2 good shots. What has happened is that rivet, it's impressed down in that leather a little bit. That's just what we want. And our last rivet. Okay, well that's a cool looking little pouch. But notice on the back, again, that cap makes it look very professional. Well, that's pretty cool. Without dry time, that took about 5 minutes to make. So let's do this. Let's step this up. We're going to add a snap. Very common, very inexpensive, very easy to set closure. Before we set our snap, or draw in our snap, notice we're kind of binding there. We're bringing that throat right up to our bend. So let's back off on this, 1/2 inch. Now, it's easy to get confused here because this is actually backwards from everything else. So let's fold that over. Now we know exactly where we want to drop that 1/2 inch. So let's draw in 1/2 inch line. There we go. Let's take this and let's cut this off first. Good. That leaves room for our last rivet. Good measurement. Second thing, let's fold this in half because what we're going to do is create our center line. Easy enough, we don't have to measure. But secondly, when we round our corners, which we'll do, they'll be perfectly symmetrical. Okay, so we've got a center line in here. Let's measure our flap because what we'll do is let's measure our flap first, then we'll mark our pocket face. That'll make that snap line up perfectly. So right here, we can drop our snap in anywhere we want. But let's do this. Let's come in about 1 inch, right on our center line. Oh, and the pin strikes again. I've got it all over me. So with that, let's take this around, fold this. There we go. Drop that in square. Let's just press hard. There's our snap. Let's mark it and snap. Okay, easy enough. Last thing, let's round our flap. It's pretty cool flat. But let's round this a little bit, make it look a little more professional. How are we going to do that? Well, it's super easy. We folded this in half, so let's do that again. How about we take a coffee cup? Let's drop that in, and if we do this again while it's folded, it's going to be perfectly symmetrical. If it's not a perfect circle, it's going to be the same on both sides. So therefore, it'll look like we meant to do that. Trim that last piece off. Okay. Let's see how this looks. Well, very cool. Looking better and better. Now let's step over and set our snap. Then we'll do our rivets and this is complete. The way we've done this, we could always set our snap on the inside. We simply drop our anvil in and set the snap. But what we're going to do now is let's do this the way we should in the proper order of steps. Let's set our snap or our closure first. We've used our revolving punch. And we can certainly drop this in. I'm going to go up to about the 4th hole for our snap post. Let's punch that, okay? Problem on this end is, with the revolving, I can't get to that hole. So what I need to do is use a drive punch. Now if you don't have a drive, eventually you can pick these up. But what I can do is curl my leather over, then squeeze my revolving onto that. Not necessarily the best way to go. So let's take our mallet. I'm going to use about 1/8 of an inch, and let's punch right there for our snap. Easy enough. All right, let's move our cutting board or our punch board out of the way. We want to make sure we use this when we're using a drive punch. Now, with our snaps, we're going to use what's called a line 20. It's a common snap. You see this everywhere. There's a 20 and a 24. The 20 is for thinner leathers, 4 to 5 ounce. That's what we're working with. Now we've got 2 posts. So we've got one with a naked back, and obviously there's our cap. We've got 2 female pieces. Here's the trick. We're just riveting these onto the leather. These 2 pieces will bite. That's just how we add them to the leather. If we get these reversed, doesn't matter. But let's do it the way it should be done. So on our flap, I'm going to take the back piece. Obviously there's our cap. So let's take this, come in from the back. Good, it's a snug hole. Let's take our female piece with a flange on the inside. Now with this, I'm going to take my setter. And again, we've got a small pack that's got our setter, our anvil, and some snaps in it. So I'm going to put that tip right down in that post. Give that 2 good shots. Now, I just want to hit that enough to where it doesn't spin. I don't want to hit it so hard that it draws this flange in. Let's go just one more. There we go. Now, you may not be able to see on camera, but that post has rolled down in there very easily. On this side, we're going to add our cap. But notice our cap, that needs to be on our top grain. So let's flip that over. Here's when we're going to use our anvil. Notice it's concave. So let's drop our snap in that. That way we don't flatten the cap. Drop our second piece on. Same thing. There we go. Let's go one more that's turning just a little bit. Good, that rolled down in there nicely. Let's fold this around and see how that snaps. Just right. So what I'm going to do is glue, set our rivets, and we're done with this pouch. Our pouch is done. Well, how's our snap fit? Look at that. Spot on. That's what we're looking for. Now, because we trimmed this, it's not binding. Our flap's a little bit long. So, next step, what we're going to do, primarily, we're going to learn how to hand sew. You'll be amazed at how easy it is and how good it looks. But also, let's trim an inch off this pouch flap. To save us some time, I've just cut us a new pattern. I've dropped my 1/2 inch off the throat. Basically what we're doing is we're refining our pattern down to a workable size. So down here, we want to drop an inch off of our flap. So let's drop an inch, use our coffee cup to round our corners. There's our flap rounded 1 inch shorter. Now, we don't need our rivet holes over here. Don't have to measure that because we're going to hand sew. But let's do this. Let's come in 1 inch, again on our center line. And I've folded my pattern so I know right where that is. So let's draw that in. Let's fold this closed, and again, we're going to mark for our snap. Let's just press right there. There it is. Snap's going to fit nicely. Let's step over. I'm going to cut some leather. Then we're going to add a groove line in to set us up for hand sewing. Our basic body is cut. Now, one thing we need to remember, we trimmed off a 1/2 inch here. So this mark is not going to be accurate when we're gluing. We'll take care of that. But let's go ahead and mark for our snap. Good. Let's flip this over. Now, as always with a pouch, to keep from getting confused, let's fold our flap up, but to this end, there's our mark. So there's the mark where we're going to stop gluing. There's our bottom. Let's do the same on this side. That's ready. Now we're going to use what's called a groover. Easy tool. In fact, it literally cuts a groove. Primary job here is to cut a groove in our leather, give us a guide for sewing, but also that allows our stitch line to sink down into the leather. We can adjust this. There's a chuck right there. I tend to set mine at 1/8 inch. Now I have several, so I've marked this at 1/8 inch because that's my stitch line. To me, I like an 1/8 inch in. It's not too far, it's not too little. I'm going to butt the guide against the edge of the leather. I'm going to give it just a little counterclockwise pressure. Look at that. Well, that's easy enough, right? So what we want to do is we're going to go all the way around because I simply like the look of a groove line on the edge of my leather, even if I'm not sewing. Gives it a very finished look. So let's start right here, work all the way around. And down to our end. Now we can run right off the end. It's not going to be that big of a deal. But what I want to do is stop short of the end and then let's come across. There we go. So notice that gives us a nice square corner. Again, a very easy tool to use. Let's jump over. I'm going to set my snaps. Then we'll step back over here and glue. Our snap is set, but notice too, look at the difference in our flap. Totally different look with that simple tool. Okay, let's glue. We're going to drop this up to our mark. Good dry time on our glue. Let's step over. We're going to use what's called a chisel. Makes the whole sewing process a breeze. We're going to use what's called a chisel. This is going to do all the work for us. This is my favorite. It's a flat chisel, 1/8 inch flat. So therefore I've got an 1/8 inch tine, 1/8 inch spread. Now this is my favorite simply because it's going to make our stitch line look just like a machine stitch. But at the same time, It's going to give us a nice wide hole. Makes that very easy on our hands when we're sewing. So with this, let's start with our punch board. We want to make sure we have this behind our leather so our tines can sink into this. Unlike our quartz, we ding our tines. All right, let's start right here. I'm going to take my first tine and I'm going to butt it right up against this incoming groove line. So there we go. Let's sink that right in our groove. Easy enough to see. In fact, I can feel it sit down in that little groove. Now, what we want, let's try to get this as straight up and down as we can. That means it's going to go straight through the leather. Now, if you're not confident with that, lean out just a little bit. The one thing we don't want to do is lean in. So therefore, when our chisel goes through, it actually comes out the edge of our leather. So right here, let's butt to our end. There we go. I can feel tines all the way across. I'd really like to go a little bit further. There we go. Okay, now I can see and feel tines. When we're taking our chisel out, let's try not to wag back and forth. Let's place our finger right on our leather and go lengthwise. Notice how easy it is to pull that out. Now we've got a whole video on hand sewing. It's going to show you all the ins and outs, but this is a crash course. So right here, I'm going to take my first tine, I'm going to put it in my last hole, sink that chisel right in my groove line. There we go. Let's double check. Oh yeah, look at that. Now I can see tines. There we go. Now, we're going to come down. We've got 1, 2, 4, and 6. This all comes in a set. But that's so we can work towards an end or we can go around corners. With our 4, we're still a little bit short, getting close to our end. So let's go back to our 6. Right here, let's put the first 2 tines in pre-existing holes. There we go. Got tines. Let's take a look at this. So already, look how clean and consistent that is. It already looks like we have a stitch line in it. That's what we're looking for. I'm going to do the other side, then let's sew this together. There we go. But notice too, because we're using our first time last hole, notice we're perfectly consistent and we end in exactly the same place. All right, let's drop a stitch in. A big help when we're hand sewing is called a sewing pony. We can open this up, drop our project in, and clamp it down. Now, technically, this is made to sit on. This turns. I've got mine really cranked down. There we go. So when we sit on this, it puts our project right in front of us. I tend to like to stand up when I'm sewing, simply because I have more upper body strength and I can see better. We're going to use a wax thread, typical sewing thread. We're going to use an 8mm. It's my favorite. It's a good size, not too big, not too little. And on our needles, these are specifically made for hand sewing. No sharp point. We don't need a sharp point. Our holes are pre-punched. So let's start right here. We're going to do what's called a saddler stitch. Common stitch, easy to do. I've got a needle on both ends. Now I'm going to go about 4 times my length. Technically 5 or 6 on a smaller project, just so I have enough room to tie a knot. So with this, let's start right here. 1 needle through our first hole. And let's equalize out our thread. Second hole, I'm going to start on one side, bring my needle through. I'm going to take the other needle, I'm going to go through that same hole, coming back. Now let's do this. Let's come about halfway through. I'm going to make an X. I'm going to move my fingers from the eye to the point. There we go. Easy enough. We've got 1 stitch. Now I'm going to pull that down just to where I can see it sink into the leather. So let's go to our next hole. Same thing. 1 needle through, drop our second through the back, make an X, pull it through. Now let's do this. Let's see how fast we can hand sew. Look at that. That's not bad. We did 1 inch in no time at all. So I'm going to finish this out, get down to our second from the last hole. Last hole, we're going to hide our knot. So what I'm going to do is take my back needle. I'm going to come through 1 ply, slide that through. Same on the front. Let's just come through our front ply. Let's pull this lengthwise, tighten that down. Now we're going to do a simple square knot. So what I'm going to do is take my right thread. I'm going to go over my left and circle around. Let's draw that down in. Good. Now, same thing, but opposite. I'm going to take my left, go over my right, circle around. Let's draw that down. With my needle, or with my knife, I'm not going to cut through my thread. I'm going to pull the thread across my knife. So right here, we rarely use this. There we go, let's extend that. There we go, we rarely use this part of our blade. So I'm going to lay that right in, pull my thread across. Nice. Squeeze that down. We've got a good stitch line. I'm going to turn this over, do the same thing on the other side. Okay, our knot is in. Bring that across our blade. Very good. In fact, that sewing simply took about 4 minutes and it looks pretty good. I want to do one more thing though. Let's step over to our quartz. The last thing I want to do when I'm hand sewing is I want to tap down my stitch line. This is going to do a couple of things. It's going to close our holes. It's going to sink our stitch line down in that groove line, but it's also going to spread that stitch out a little bit. Now, I don't want to hit this hard enough to ding the leather. So let's use the part of the mallet that I don't use for my rivets. Well, how about that? Very easy, good looking pouch. Look at that snap, works nicely. Just what we're looking for. It may be a simple project, but it's clean, it's tight, and it's professional. Now, a couple of points, and I'm going to do my best not to roll here because there are so many things we can say about Leathercraft. First big point, nothing we've done is difficult. Leather is just elements, and they are all easy to learn. Second big point, in a little more than 20 minutes, we now know how to cut a pattern, cut leather, punch a hole, set a rivet, set a snap, use a groover, our chisels, and hand sew. And with these techniques, we can go from the most simple to the most complex project. And you know what? We haven't even scratched the surface. All right, at this point, 2 big hopes. I hope you've had a great time with this because I certainly have. Second big hope is that you dive into Leathercraft, have a great time doing it, and create some beautiful work. Good luck with your project.